Let me thank each of you for joining us this morning for another very important event in the life of the University of Louisville. We're gathered today to recognize, honor, and express our appreciation to one of our own, former Cardinal, Dr. Carol Garrison. So let's go ahead and cheer for Carol. Now, a number of years ago, we had an idea, or I should say I had an idea. And it was to create this area. Behind the screen here is the Jefferson Room where our Board of Trustees meets 10 times a year, but I won't comment on that. Bruce, we love having you here 10 times a year. Where are you? But anyway. But we thought that it would be appropriate to take this area and create what we called the Hall of Provosts. And we wanted to do that really for three reasons. And that was to honor the position of provost at the University of Louisville, number one. Number two, to honor our current outstanding provost, Dr. Shirly Willihnganz. And then number three, to honor those who've served in this position prior to Shirly. Shirly told me she didn't think it was a very good idea. And I could be cynical and say she tells me that on a lot of my ideas, but I won't say that. So anyway, I was pretty dogged and determined that we were going to do this. And I think the only way that I was able to finally convince Shirly was she realized that that might be the only way to get a portrait in Grawemeyer Hall that wasn't of old white guys that are all upstairs. So she finally relented. And last year, as part of the State of the University Week celebration, we dedicated this area as the Hall of Provosts, and we honored Shirly for her outstanding service. Today, we're honored to celebrate the achievement of Shirly's predecessor, Carol Garrison. And Carol, we thank you for being here, Julian, for being here. And we want to honor Carol for many reasons. And I'm going to focus on two that are both professional, but very much personal to me as well. 1995, I was working at another university in the state, and I always assumed I'd probably end up retiring at that institution. And I got an opportunity with Governor Paul Patton to become his state budget director. And I said, nah, no way, we're not moving. And my wife said, over my dead body. But Paul said something to me that made me rethink, and that is that he wanted to be the higher education governor, and that he was intending on becoming the higher education governor. So we never moved, and I commuted, did all kinds of things to be state budget director, and then to work with Paul on the passage of the Post-Secondary Education Reform Act of 1997. And so when the bill passed the General Assembly, and there was a bill signing, there was a lot of celebration. And then the next day, we felt like the dog that had chased the car. We said, uh-oh, what do we do now? And the General Assembly, in that legislation, did what they had done in some other legislation. They had designated that the state budget director would oversee the Council on Post-Secondary Education, the newly created Council on Post-Secondary Education, and the newly created Kentucky Community and Technical College system until its permanent leadership was selected. So I really knew I was in big trouble then as state budget director with these responsibilities. So the first thing that I did was hire a provost, an interim provost. And I don't see Tony here today, but it was Tony Newberry. And so Tony was the first interim provost of the Kentucky Community and Technical College system. Tony, as you know, is now the president of Jefferson Community and Technical College system. Great partner of ours, great friend of ours, and as I say, we can't do at the University of Louisville what we do if Tony and the community college do what they do. The second thing I did is called as many people as I could to say we need help. And there was never a time that I didn't call John Shoemaker at the University of Louisville that he didn't say, absolutely, we'll help. And we'll do whatever we can to move this new legislation forward. Now, Carol, he always said something else. He'd always said yes, but he always said, now let me go check with Carol. And so I ended up working with Carol a lot, and I would say, Carol, I need somebody to know something about student support services. And the next thing I know, she would send somebody from UofL to Frankfurt to work with us. And she didn't send them for an hour or two or for a meeting or two. She sent them to work with us for days and weeks. And many of the people that she sent were really doing their jobs here, but also doing their jobs in Frankfurt, trying to get this new Kentucky Community and Technical College system started. So from IT to student services, and then Carol herself made many trips, and in particular, there were a lot of accreditation issues, and I remember a lot of the discussions with Carol around how do we work through these issues and satisfy SAC so that this new Kentucky Community and Technical College system can be accredited. So Carol, I want to thank you for the important role that you played in the success of today's Kentucky Community and Technical College system. And thank you on behalf of all Kentuckians for that. The second reason I want to thank Carol, again from a professional and personal perspective, is Carol selected Dr. Willihnganz as her replacement as the interim provost at the University of Louisville. So when Carol became interim president, she needed a provost, and she selected Shirly as the interim provost, and I've been thankful every day since that you made that decision. When I was selected as interim president, we had a lot of interims going on at that time. In the fall of 2002, the Board of Trustees approved that. Bruce, I think they were desperate at that time, but anyway, they approved that. And after the meeting, there were a line of people wishing to congratulate me, or more often to say, you know, my budget is underfunded, I need more money, or just to suck up or whatever. But the last person waiting very patiently in the back of the room for everyone else to leave was Dr. Willihnganz. And she raised her hand and said, hello, I'm your provost. And again, I want to repeat that I've been thankful for that every day since. John Shoemaker and Carol Garrison did some amazing things at this university and set us on the amazing path and the amazing trajectory that we're on today. As we say at the University of Louisville, it's happening here, and Dr. Willihnganz has been the one that has made things happen. And Carol, we still talk about vision, focus, and action. I don't know if you remember that, but you left that on her desk and my desk, and that's been sort of a roadmap that has guided us. So Carol, we want to thank you for your leadership at the University of Louisville, for your support of the higher ed reform in Kentucky, and for having the great sense to pick Shirly as your successor. We owe a great deal to you. I also thought it was pretty neat that when Carol left and went to become president of the University of Alabama at Birmingham, that she selected Dr. Eli Capilouto as her provost there. So I would say Carol has a pretty good eye for talent and a pretty good ability to select outstanding people. We're greatly honored to have Eli and his wife, Marilyn, with us today. I know it means a lot to Carol, it means a lot to us. We're fortunate to have Eli in Kentucky. We're fortunate to have Eli at the University of Kentucky. University of Kentucky and University of Louisville are the two designated research universities. And we do work closely together. And our success, in all candor, is tied to the success of the University of Kentucky. So it's a great honor for us, Eli and Marilyn, to have you on campus. And Eli, with that, I'll turn it over to you. And then I told Eli the other day, we were at a CPE meeting, I said, Eli, I'll go first, then I'll turn it over to you. And the white guys will get out of the way and let the women take over. So that's what we're going to do.
Thank you, Jim. It is a delight to be here and an honor. Jim and I, we are a team when we're at those CPE meetings. We seek each other out and want to sit next to each other as partners, and he's been a very wonderful colleague and friend since my arrival, and I'm glad he honors me today to include me in something that's very special to me. As Carol used to tell people, and I had the same kind of career path, I'm an accidental administrator. But every day in the work I do, several times a day, both consciously and subconsciously, I say, well, what would Carol do? Because 11 years ago this month, Carol called me when I was I'd had enough in my first accidental run in administration as a dean. I was really going to move away from academia. And she had just arrived in Birmingham, and she said, I want to talk to you about being interim provost. And so that turned into 9 years of incredible instruction for me. And that's why I ask, especially when I confront difficult problems, what would Carol do? So what were the simple but profound things I learned as a provost for 9 years under Carol's tutelage? Number one, I learned that courage comes easy when you, at the end of the day, say you got to do the right thing. You know, you struggle with all these things, but Carol would always say, "Okay, what's the right thing?" And you know, then it seems to work out. Another lesson I learned that family comes first. Carol was pretty hard driving, but when it came to checking on her mother, our phone call from Emily, everything stopped. And she made sure the entire organization understood that's the way things were. So it was the culture, thanks to Carol. She also taught me that students come first in everything we do. And you have to remember that. That's why we're all here. And she was a great mentor. Now, there were a few things Carol didn't teach me so well. Okay, I'm going to tell you just about one of them. And Carol was masterful when she took you to the woodshed. You know, she did it so nicely. But I'll have to tell you this one story. She was going to a wedding with her daughter Emily in Hawaii. So we were walking down the hallway. She was going to get on this elevator to leave. And she was giving me my final instructions because, you know, I was going to be in charge for a little while. And there was a pending snowstorm. And Carol's last words to me when the elevator closed, Carol was pretty tough on this closing the university for bad weather. Carol said, "Whatever you do, don't close this university." I said, "Yes, ma'am." So they, you know, I'm in this decision tree, and I get my phone call at 3:30 in the morning. They say, "You got to make a call by 5:30 whether we're going to close or not." So I sat there in front of that Weather Channel TV, and you know, the police are supposed to go out and check the roads and everything. And I sit there, and across the bottom of that TV is this red band that says, "Do not get in your car unless it's an emergency." So I kept looking at that thing. And those police would call me and say, "Hey, we got to have a decision. We got to have a decision." All I could think of was that elevator door closing. So I started. She never asked me for it. I decided to record the Weather Channel. Because I was going to show her, this is what they said. All right, so I make the decision to close. All right, I've been up all night, and I'm supposed to go to an event for football recruits. And I didn't know if we were going to have it. It was scheduled at 10 o'clock. I thought the snow would shut the city down. So I try to get an hour's sleep. I wake up at 7 o'clock. There's not a flake of snow anywhere. Okay. I get to the football recruit breakfast. Finally, when we left there, it started snowing. But I said, "Gee, you know, will this be noticed?" The parent of a football recruit sits down next to me and said, This is going to be one hell of a storm. I said, "Oh, did you watch the weather?" He said, "No, I heard UAB close." He said, "They never close." So this is the other part. I drive home. I walk in. I'm not exaggerating. And I have my phone. And, there are a few snowflakes coming down. I'm holding my phone, and I turned to Mary Lynn, I said, I'm going to hear from Carol. That moment, I got an email that said, Eli, I hear the university's closed, and there's no snow on the street. So that story really followed me, because when I got to Lexington, they don't even allow me to make a decision on the closing. But no, it was a delight for me to learn at Carol's feet. And I learned every day. I bet we communicated 5 to 10 times a day, either by email or our offices were next to each other. And she was just a great source of knowledge and inspiration for me, and I use it every day. When I attended one of our CPE meetings, and Jim couldn't be there, and Shirly presented, we both had to present on our universities, and Shirly showed this great summary of all the good things that are going on at the University of Louisville, but one graph that I particularly understood was the increase in graduation rates, because under Carol's leadership, when she came to Birmingham, ours mirrors that. And it's because of her and putting students first. So I know that many of the good things that are happening here at Louisville are because of Carol's leadership. And I know that many of the good things that are happening at the University of Kentucky indirectly are because of Carol's involvement in teaching me. And then I know all the good things that are continuing at the University of Louisville are a result of Jim Ramsey and the fact that he got his degrees from the University of Kentucky.
Not quite sure how to follow that. Thank you, President Capilouto. I would just want to say a few things today, too. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Ramsey, because as much as I gave him a hard time about this, it's been really fun having the portrait hanging out in the lobby. And I have to admit that I'm going to be really glad to not be hanging out down here by myself. So I'm really glad that Dr. Garrison's portrait is going to be joining mine. I think more, though, I want to thank Dr. Ramsey, because he really does understand the role of provost. He deeply respects it. He deeply honors it. As much as he said, it's great to be working with me, I have to say that right back. There is nobody better, and I have been so honored to learn from him and to be the provost at this university. But I think, when we talk about that role of provost, I always make fun of that a little bit, because, people always introduce me as the provost, and I've now started going in front of groups and saying, does anybody know what a provost is? Because they're like, I don't know, she's a provost, I don't know what she does. She must be somebody, she's talking. And so, I think Dr. Ramsey truly understands the role. And, as time has gone by, the role keeps expanding and keeps changing. And I actually think it keeps becoming a harder and harder job. Dr. Capilouto talked about snow decisions. I will tell you, there are no decisions that are more difficult than those, especially when you're in the South where it might happen and it might not. And people are saying we need a decision, and it's really very hard. But, partly the provost role, when it started out, it was almost like the intellectual leader within a church. And so it was always this idea that you needed someone who was kind of in charge of making sure that the thought process of an organization, the academic process, the intellectual process, actually was happening and staying center the way that it should. As a matter of fact, at one point, there was a lot of worry that provosts were becoming too secular, and that, of course, is why they started deans, so that they could deal with all the stuff that the provost shouldn't have to worry about. As time has gone by, though, university roles have expanded. So instead of just being places where we hold knowledge, so that there's a historical record of things that have happened, and where we create new knowledge, and where we disseminate that knowledge, both among ourselves and to our students. Universities today, have huge athletics programs. There's hugely political pieces of them as they work with legislators and the government to try to keep them funded. There's huge pieces of community engagement as we become both the leaders and the cornerstones of community, and our work is seen as an economic engine to drive quality of life and a better life for people in our communities. And as the president role expands, the provost role also has to expand. So we're still the chief academic officers. Often we're still responsible for day-to-day stuff at the university, like canceling school because of snow. But also, I refer to the role as sometimes the role of the provost is what I call not the president, in that everybody wants the president, but if they can't have the president, they'll take you. And I don't mean that in any bad way. It's just kind of like, okay, if Jim can't be in two places at once, he'll send me, and they'd really rather have the president, but I'm okay. But it sort of expands what provosts have to do. And I will tell you that as I have taken on this job, I am extraordinarily grateful to Carol, because the role model that I have for how you ought to be a provost is her. And I also learned so much because I was an associate dean and acting dean while she was provost. And I will tell you that there are a lot of things that happened here because John Shoemaker kind of had the vision and was the mastermind, but Carol had the ability to turn it into an operational program that would actually get it done. And I'm just going to name a few things that happened while she was here. Dr. Ramsey's already talked about House Bill 1. Hugely important for this university in changing our trajectory so that we would become a major research university, which really we hadn't thought about doing very much before that. If you think about Metro College and how all across the country that program has been emulated and held up as an example of how a university, community, state partnership can work. No one has been able to replicate that because I think so much of what Carol put into that made it something that was just superbly designed to work here with the people who were at the table. If you think back to the Challenge of Excellence, the first time this university really had a roadmap for how to set research and academic priorities so that we could move forward to do what we knew we wanted to do. So I always think of, when I think of John Shoemaker and Carol Garrison, I always think that John showed us what we could be, but Carol showed us how we could do it and how we could get it done. Vision, focus, action. Certainly for us, the roadmap for how to be a more student-centered university, how to improve graduation rates. The balanced scorecard, which we use still today. Linda Shapiro and Carol developed that so that we would have a set of metrics so that we could measure progress and not just be patting ourselves on the back because it felt good, but to actually have some numbers and some metrics that we could look at that every year we could go to the board and drive for. Certainly, Maureen Taylor Archer is here, our Vice Provost for Diversity. Realizing that if we're going to truly be a great metropolitan research university, we also have to think about how to make sure that everyone has a part in that and everyone is included as that agenda moves forward. She also brought us PeopleSoft, but I'm not going to spend a long time talking about that. It's also a lot of personal characteristics that made Carol and makes Carol still such a role model for me. She was tough, but she was kind. She was wise, pragmatic, challenging, but nobody more supportive. I think when you talk about, I can't remember the woman's name, but the woman who just wrote Lean In, where women need to move forward because we all just need to take more on and do more. I think about Carol, raising a family, raising a daughter, being there for all of us, pushing always to be the best and to do the right thing, and doing it in a way that never diminished the role of a female in those roles, and just, I think, really showed us what women can do when they get into leadership positions. She also went on to UAB, and I think, again, an extraordinarily successful university president. And while a lot of women are becoming provosts, it's still really tough to become a female president of a major public university. There just aren't that many. An extraordinary run there, doing what I think Jim Dunderstadt, who many of you might know is the former president of the University of Michigan, he always talked about the importance of making sure that the university stayed more than that thing that was caught between the medical school and the athletics program. Knowing that you can't be a great university unless all of your schools and colleges are strong. Knowing that you can't be a great university unless you support and foster extraordinary faculty, give them the tools they need to do their work, and you can't be a great university if you ever forget that the whole reason for being here are the students. Carol, I want to thank you for giving me a chance at this and for all I learned from you, and I'm deeply honored to be part of this today so that you can unveil your portrait and you can join us here in the Hall of Provosts. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I can't tell you what an honor and privilege it is really to be here today. It's very hard, as I'm standing here, for me to believe that it's been almost 11 years since I have been on the UofL campus. Where did the time go? We were driving, my husband Julian and I were driving here yesterday from our house in North Carolina. It takes about 6.5 hours to get here. And so I was entertaining him for that 6.5 hours with stories of UofL, about my years in Louisville and everything that had happened. I talked about my experiences here, working with really outstanding faculty, and there are no better faculty than at UofL. Outstanding faculty, amazing staff, some of the brightest students that you'll find anywhere in the country, dedicated administrative team, and I've gotten to visit with a lot of them over the last 12 hours or so, and very importantly, a committed community. And for those of you here from the community, I can't tell you how important it is to a university in terms of being able to move forward, to have that commitment from the community. I talked about all the dreams we had at UofL. And of course, those were dreams that were started 16 years ago. And I was getting Julian ready to see how those dreams had really taken hold and how they had been accomplished. I was sure that most of them had been accomplished because, once a cardinal, always a cardinal. And even though I had left, I had followed from afar a number of the things that were going on, and I'd have the opportunity to run into Jim, to run into Shirley, to run into some of the rest of the faculty from UofL and get updated. So I was really excited. But I have to tell you, nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what I saw when we drove through this campus late yesterday afternoon. My jaw dropped. I could hardly catch my breath because it was so amazing. The transformation that has occurred at this institution has surpassed, I think, any dream that I could have possibly had. Those dreams of 15 or 16 years ago, I mean, every single one of them. As a matter of fact, to me, it's clear that the visionary leadership that you have here at this point in time, in concert with the faculty, the staff, the students, and the community, dreams that were so much larger. There was a president of UAB that had said, the first president that said, you can do a university a disservice if you dream too little dreams. Well, Jim and Shirley, it is obvious that you have not dreamt too little dreams here. And the whole Commonwealth of Kentucky, Louisville, the region clearly has benefited from that in just an amazing way. Now, I started by saying that it's a real honor and privilege to be here. I feel humbled. I mean, I feel like I was just kind of this very small part of maybe somewhere in the middle of the great history of this institution, and was very lucky to have the opportunity to be here. And some folks have talked about learning from me, but I have to tell you, I learned a tremendous amount when I was at UofL from all of the people that I worked with here. So something tells me the best is yet to come for this institution. And if the current trajectory is any indication of what is going to happen, the sky is absolutely the limit. So to those of you, trustees, don't let these folks go anywhere. When you've got leadership that this great, you want to make sure that it stays in place. To all of you who have come here today, I want to also thank you for that. It's a very special opportunity for me to be able to catch up with my colleagues, with the vice presidents I worked with the deans that I worked with the staff from the Provost's office, and just so many of the other people that really made the difference on a day-to-day basis. So, thank you, and this day will remain a very special day for me forever.
better than that.